Hi, my name's Madison Griffin, and I will be giving my presentation on green roofs, their design, history, and importance in big cities. So, green roofs can be simple, with as little as 2 inches of soil substrate and hardy plants, vines, or moss, and they require little to no maintenance, much like the roof here in this picture. Or they can be as complex as a rooftop park or botanical garden. They can be installed anywhere on residential and commercial buildings and industrial facilities. For the purposes of this presentation, I will be focusing on buildings in larger cities. Cities as varied as Zurich, Tokyo, London, New York, Seattle, Chicago, and Montreal and Toronto are incentivizing green roofs to reduce heat produced by concrete jungles and to abate stormwater runoff, which can severely overtax a city's sewer system. So, why should we green our roofs? Well, I'm focusing on buildings in this presentation, and buildings account for 33% of global greenhouse emissions. And they also account for 40% of energy use, and that's just in the US. They still account for over 20% in Spain, China, Japan, 39%, so about the same in Great Britain, and over 40% in Switzerland and Brazil. So it's definitely a prerogative if we intend to get the greenhouse emissions down. Another reason why we need to green our roofs in cities especially is the heat island effect. So according to National Geographic News, the heat island effect is an urban phenomenon in which sunlight hitting predominantly concrete, asphalt, and metal structures gets re-radiated as heat, making cities several degrees warmer than surrounding rural areas. And to exacerbate the effects, more electricity is used to cool buildings, which creates even more greenhouse emissions. And the air conditioners themselves also generate more heat to cool the insides of the sun-warmed spaces. Since green spaces absorb heat and sequester carbon dioxide, green roofs are seen as a possible way to ameliorate heat islands. So, around the world, many cities have passed laws requiring some rooftop cultivation. And in the US, many cities have incentivized green roofs through tax rebates, insurance to retrofit green roofs, grants, and other means. Another issue and another reason we should green our roofs is stormwater runoff, and this is especially a big deal in cities. So in larger cities, stormwater can flood a city's sewer system, which would allow untreated water to be released in nearby watersheds. And it can also flood underground and low-level areas in the city, so like the New York subway. Green roofs can absorb as much as 9/10 of the storm's peak flow, the point in time which the storm is hitting the hardest, and it can help prevent sewer systems from becoming overwhelmed. What is a green roof? So green roofs are also called roof gardens, eco roofs for their ecological benefits, and living roofs, which can include living walls like vines or green balconies. Green roofs are any roofs incorporating green technology. These most commonly include vegetated roofs. Some academics also include types of cool roofs which use building materials that reflect sunlight, or that harness it, like solar paneled roofs. The new College of Education building at the University of Idaho campus uses a cool roof system, which has some of the benefits of green roofs. It reflects sunlight instead of absorbing it and producing heat, which will help save an energy cost to cool the building in the summer. The admin is also covered in vines, so you can consider that a living wall. So, however, cool roofs don't offer a solution for stormwater runoff or improve the water quality. Vegetated green roofs, which are the focus of this presentation, consist of 4 main layers, listed in yellow on the diagram. Starting from the bottom, we have a waterproofing layer. This protects the roof from standing water. Drainage layers, filter membrane and drainage layer is kind of what they're called. But it has a finer filter, and then a drainage layer, which can be made up of stones like it is in the picture, and the growing medium, which would be the soil, and the vegetation, the plants. Green roofs that don't have these basic components won't be as effective. So here are a few more names that people use to differentiate types of green roof technology. First, a green roof usually refers to a vegetated or living roof. These encompass any sort of plants and design, from the moss-covered roof seen at the start of this presentation to a highly manicured lawn like the one shown here. But we've also come across another term, while I've been doing my research, called brown roofs, which were developed in the United Kingdom. Brown roofs are also a type of vegetated green roof and would be classified as one. However, brown roofs focus more on biodiversity and will often use local plants and grasses to attract local wildlife. Brown roofs are sometimes designed to provide habitats for specific insects, birds, or plants which have suffered through habitat loss in the region. And lastly, we have black roofs. These refer to the color of the solar panels spanning the roofs, which help them absorb more UV light. These are not vegetated roofs. They do have some of the benefits of other green roofs, like lower roof temperatures, more energy savings, and they are also cheaper to install than vegetated green roofs. However, they do not help with storm water flooding abatement in cities, which can be a major problem, and they don't help filter water or sequester carbon dioxide. Black roofs also have to install an extensive drainage system. There are two types of vegetated green roofs. Extensive green roofs, the one on the left, they use hardy plants that require little growing medium and little upkeep. They are cheaper to install and maintain. They often are made up of hardy sedum grasses and succulents. They are also relatively lightweight, making this the only option for roofs that have lower weight bearing than a concrete or steel roof, for instance. Cost, the EPA estimates is around $10 a square foot to install. Intensive green roofs, the one on the right, are more park-like and allow for more foot traffic. The root systems of the previous ones are too fragile to allow for too much human foot traffic. The soil substrate of intensive green roofs are much deeper, more than 20 centimeters, and the plants tend to be much heavier. They are more difficult to install because they require specialized tools to transport more soil, to transport trees, and other heavier plants, which some landscape architects or green designers might not have access to. The initial cost for installing an intensive green roof, according to the EPA, is around $25 a square foot, so a little more expensive. Maintenance on either of these type of roof systems ranges from 75 cents to $1.50 a square foot. But because the soil is deeper and the root systems of the plants, there are more variety, more extensive root systems. So intensive roof systems, the one on the right again, are more effective in reducing water runoff and improving water quality. Intensive green roofs reduce water runoff by 85% compared to a conventional roof, so one without any green roofing at all. While the extensive green roof, the one on the left, would reduce water runoff by only 60% compared to a conventional roof. Intensive green roofs reduce heavy metals in their water runoff as well, with 3 times less lead contamination, 1.5 times less zinc contamination, 2.5 times less cadmium contamination, and 3 times less copper contamination, according to a review of energy aspects of green roofs. Green roofs had practical as well as aesthetic uses throughout their history. They were commonly used in areas where other roofing resources were sparse, as in Scandinavian countries, and they were often used to provide added insulation for the harsh winters in Northern Europe and in the summer months in places like the Middle East. Because gardens leave little tangible trace, their history in ancient times is hard to track, except through written accounts. The oldest known roof gardens are the ziggurats of ancient Mesopotamia, and these were in basically city centers next to the temple. They were pyramids, one is pictured here, built from stone in a stair-step design, and they would have these roof gardens to allow walkers to have a break from the heat as they climbed. One of these ziggurats, Etemenanke, is believed to be the Tower of Babel. In 500 BC, we hear of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and they were considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Though there is no scientific evidence this garden existed, there have been several written accounts from the time corroborating it. In 79 CE, we have the Villa of Mysteries in Pompeii, and this one was fairly well preserved because of the volcanic eruption that happened at that time. So in the Middle Ages, Benedictine monks would build roof gardens within their cloister. In Mont Saint-Michel in France, there is a rather famous one. So they would have access to green spaces without having to leave their monastery. The Italian Renaissance also saw the creation of several roof gardens, including Palazzo Piccolomini, which remains the best preserved from the time period. The Aztecs were also known for having intensive green roofs with trees and flowers. Unfortunately, these were destroyed by Cortez and other Spanish conquistadors. Between 1600 and 1875, various intensive roof gardens were created by nobility in Germany and Russia. There are also some experimentation with waterproofing in Germany during this time period. King Ludwig II's roof garden used copper plates to waterproof his rooftop conservatory, but structural issues and leaks caused it to be demolished in 1897. In Berlin, Karl Rabitz, a builder, used a vulcanized cement to waterproof a middle-class residence. This one was much more successful. A scale model was exhibited at the Paris World Exposition of 1867. And on the American frontier, early settlers were using sod roofing to make up for a shortage of timber on the Great Plains. And this type of green roof has been used for centuries in Scandinavian countries to insulate their homes during extreme winter weather. So this is a brief history of roof gardens from the 1880s through the 20th century. In 1893, the term roof garden is coined to describe theater roof gardens, which are spouting up in major cities in the U.S. A famous one being Madison Square Garden in New York City. These were created to extend the theater season to a year-round program. The popularity of the theater roof gardens lasted from the 1880s until around 1920, when the advent of cinema and eventually air conditioning changed the social scene. But soon after their decline, and often inspired by theater gardens, rooftop gardens in luxurious hotels and on top of expensive high-rise apartments grow in popularity. So this is the 1920s to the 40s. Also during this time, 2 major architects, Frank Lloyd Wright, an American, and Le Corbusier, a Swiss architect, designed roofs as functional spaces. So before this time, most designers would consider roofs to be dead space. They weren't for any other use than to shelter you in your living space. But these very different architects, in Wright's case, he would design these as extra living spaces, and they would have some greenery in these living spaces. And Le Corbusier, in particular, focused on living roofs. In 1942, the world's first roof garden on top of an underground garage is created in San Francisco. But generally, during the 1940s and 50s, Post-Great Depression, post-war, few rooftop gardens are being constructed because they are mostly a luxury. The environmental benefits haven't really been explored yet. But that changes in the 1970s and 80s. Environmentalism in Germany and Europe leads to development of infrastructure with green roof technologies. In 1984, Germans create their first kind of educational program to promote green roof technology being added. And in the 1990s, green roofs and brown roofs begin to gain traction in the United Kingdom, Canada, and the US. We do have a language barrier, because most of studies and the installation had been done in languages other than English. In 1997, the Kyoto Protocol becomes the first international agreement mandating reductions in greenhouse emissions. And this affects green roof technology because, if you remember, the heat island effect in larger cities would heat buildings that used conventional roofs, causing them to be hotter than the surrounding area. And people would basically up their air conditioner in order to make way for that. So they would use more air conditioning, and the air conditioners in turn would also heat and contribute to the heat island and contribute to greenhouse emissions through more electricity being used, which use fossil fuels, and just generally more energy use. So the Kyoto Protocol is signed in 1997, and it becomes adopted in 2005, which is on the next slide. But also during this time, a federal study is conducted by Stephen Peck, and he's the founder of Green Roofs for Healthy Cities, to measure the benefits and costs of green roofs in Canada. And this is important because it did translate a lot of the German studies to make them accessible in English, and it also encouraged a lot more English speaking scientists to study green roofs and their benefits. To end this presentation, or the history of it, I'm going to focus a lot on the recent history of green roof technology, when things are really starting to get rolling. In 2001, Japan passes a law that roofs over 10,765 square feet must cultivate 20% of their roofs. In 2002, Germany, which has been a leader in green roof technology since interest developed in the 70s, now has 140 million square feet of green roofs. In the same year, the first scientific study in English focuses on a review of German research, green roof design, and construction. In 2005, the Kyoto Protocol comes into effect. It requires industrialized countries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 5.2%. This is according to kyotoprotocol.com. In 2008, over 10% of the buildings in Germany are green roofs, and the idea is starting to gain traction in the US. German green roof technology is estimated at $77 million US. It's not quite there yet in the US, but we do have 8.5 million square feet of green roofs. In May of 2009, Toronto becomes the first North American city to pass a bylaw and standards requiring green roofs. In 2010, Brooklyn Grange in New York City becomes the world's largest urban rooftop farm. So New York City has really become an urban farming area during this time. It's going through a boom. In March of 2015, France passes the first national legislation requiring all new commercial buildings to install green roofs, and they do include solar panels as a form of green roof. This is nationwide. In the US, we have doubled our installation of green roofs since 2008 to 17.5 million square feet of green roofs. In 2016, just recently in May, Hong Kong City U roof collapses due to overloading the roof, and it brings to light some of the issues with lack of standards for green roofs. I will end the presentation with a brief summary of the pros and cons of green roofs. So, pros. They do last longer than conventional roofing, between 40 and 55 years estimated. They mitigate urban heat islands, and the ones in italics are from the EPA website. They reduce energy use, reduce air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, and this includes carbon sequestration. They improve human health and comfort. They enhance stormwater management and water quality, including water filtration. Remember, the intensive green roofs do filter out heavy metals and prevent that from ending up in our water system. They also improve the quality of life by reducing noise pollution and offering more green spaces to people who may otherwise not have access to them. There are some cons to green roofs. So the scientific studies, in English at least, are still relatively new. So not a lot of people fully understand the impact of green roof technology. The upfront costs are quite high. A green roof can cost 3 to 6 times the amount of a conventional roof, though the prices of green roofs are starting to become more cost effective when you consider energy savings and water abatement costs. But in developing countries, the sticker shock can really bar initiatives. So another con, green roofs require specialized knowledge in green construction and landscape design. And a lot of green roofs that are being considered are retrofitted roofs, so on older buildings. And these roofs might need additional structural improvements for the added weight of green roofs. Another con, some cities do not have the needed regulations in place, as we recently saw with Hong Kong. And they're mostly cost effective on shorter and older buildings. So shorter, under 3 stories, because the energy, the reduction in energy use by additional insulation works better when you just have less internal space to heat and cool. And older buildings, simply because they didn't have really great insulation in the first place, and new constructions tend to have much more effective insulation. Another con of green roof is that seasonal variations do affect the green roof's efficiency. So for instance, in Portland, 100% of the summer rains are absorbed, so they have 100% water abatement in the summer. However, in the winter, they only have around 20%. So that's still more than a conventional roof. However, the seasonal variations kind of might be prohibitive for some people. And it's similar with reducing heat. It helps with insulation mostly in extreme weather in the summer and winter. Spring and fall are a little more similar to conventional roofs. But that being said, I believe that green roofs, there are more pros, honestly, than cons. And with the incentives that are in large cities around the country, all over the country, cities in Texas, in New York, in the Northwest, in Chicago, in Canada, and all over Europe, 75 in Germany, municipalities incentivize these. So, with those incentives and with other efforts to reduce greenhouse emissions, I think green roof technology really does have a place in that.